Hello and welcome to On Farm. I'm Anna Davis and thank you as always for joining us. As we come out of lockdown and the sun starts to shine, thoughts for many of us, certainly for me anyway, turn to travel, holidays and doing whatever we can to get out of the house. Bookings for UK holidays went up by 300% in 2020, according to an article in the Independent newspaper. Whilst this is at least partly driven by uncertainty around foreign holidays and travel rules, bookings for UK holidays were already rising by over 10% per year long before COVID struck. Another piece of research from Booking.com suggests that nearly half of us plan to spend more of our holiday time in our home country in future. All this amounts to an opportunity for those of us running farm businesses, often in some of the most beautiful and coveted parts of Scotland. So this episode is for you if you've ever wondered about how you would start agritourism on your farm, whether it's offering bed and breakfast, converting a barn to a bunkhouse or putting in bell tents to start a glamping offer. We have got useful advice for you. We have with us experts from two companies, Douglas Hume & Co, chartered accountants and tax experts who advise farms and rural businesses on how to make the most of their assets, and also FBRSeed, surveyors and land agents with a big focus on farm and estate management and diversification. I won't say too much about them now, I'll let them introduce themselves at the start of the chat.
I'm Sheryl Macaulay. I'm one of the directors at Douglas Hume & Co, chartered accountants and tax advisors. Our main office is in Kelso and we have offices all around the borders, Edinburgh and North England. I've been with the firm since 2002, so nearly 20 years, and became a director, about 9 years ago. My main job in the firm is to do tax planning for our clients, so inheritance tax, capital gains tax, income tax. That is the more exciting parts of the accountancy and tax world.
Thank you, Sheryl. Now, obviously, this is a podcast, so people can't see you, but you really do not look old enough to have been working there for 20 odd years. That's unbelievable. But thank you. David, if you could also do the same thing, please, and tell us who you are and what you do.
I'm the managing director of FBRSeed, which is a merger of two companies a year ago, FBR from Kelso and Seed & Co from Duns. And we employ about 30 people and look after land, property and buildings for clients all over Scotland, but mainly in the southeast and up into the Lothians. And I'm also a farmer with as a family farming partnership. All of that keeps me gainfully employed all of the time. I also am far too young looking, although you can't see me, I'm far too young looking to have done this for about 35 or 40 years, obviously.
You took the words right out of my mouth there, David. But I was also thinking, you obviously don't have very much time to twiddle your thumbs because it sounds like you've got plenty, like you said, to keep you occupied.
I still try to find plenty of time to do lots of pastimes in the area here, shooting and fishing and all the different things. So I still do try to get a good balance, and I think I'm a reasonable delegator, which is always a useful skill to learn for anybody. Definitely,
yes. I think I've only semi-mastered that skill myself, so you might have to give me some tips later on. What have you noticed over the last few years from speaking to various clients and even just chatting to friends and neighbours about the idea of on-farm tourism?
Well, you're completely right. Over the last few years, this sector of the diversified business, for farms has grown hugely. And in the last year and this year, it's continuing in this sort of hundreds of percent increase due to not being able to go abroad. And so, it's a massive opportunity. But even before 2020 and COVID, many farms and estates and other landowners were trying to expand into this market, and glamping had become very popular. We have many clients and many friends who have farms and bits of land in Scotland and all over the UK who are trying to benefit from this and get on and start something up. Diversification, it's actually just looking at the opportunities that come along and working out how you can benefit from them.
According to the Independent newspaper, the number of UK holiday bookings rose by a whopping 300% in 2020, presumably as an almost direct result of COVID and the inability of people to travel abroad. But actually, as you said, David, even before COVID, bookings for holidays within the UK were still rising by at least 10% per year. So it sounds very exciting. It is very exciting, and it creates an opportunity for many businesses. But we can't, any of us, just wake up one day and decide, right, that's it. As of today, I'm now a tourism operator. Sheryl, a question for you, really. You know, there are so many considerations when looking at projects like this, but for most people, the primary one has to be financial. Can I afford this? What financial implications are there? And am I going to make a profit? I suppose are the key questions. This is a biggie for you, I suppose, in terms of a question. But, you know, where should people's thinking start when they've got this seed of an idea when it comes to the financials behind it?
Planning is absolutely the key, because if you have the right stepping stones in the beginning, then it's a lot easier. If you get it wrong and have to unravel and restructure and things in the future, it can be a bit of a nightmare. So planning is absolutely key. You have to think about all taxes when you come to look at a kind of new project. It might seem that it's a great opportunity for income tax. However, it may have a knock-on effect to inheritance tax or capital gains tax. So it's really important that you look across all taxes and VAT as well, because that can always be one to watch out for. It really depends who's going to be involved in the project. So you may have one generation of farmers and the new generation coming up. Is it the new generation that's project? You know, are they going to take this project on their own? Where's the money coming from? Do they have to borrow the money? Who's going to borrow the money? And as you say, is it going to make any money? So it's really important that you kind of look at cash flows and see where, you know, how much this is going to cost. What's the likely income streams that you're going to get from it? And is there anything to watch out for?
Sometimes the agricultural sector or the rural sector can be a bit private, I suppose, and you know, we can't blame them. But are there any models or any kind of public case studies, as it were, that you're aware of that people can essentially follow? You know, these are the steps that I need to follow when thinking about the financials for creating a self-catering business or a glamping site, or is that something that very much needs to be done on an individual basis?
I would say it's on an individual basis, because every farming family will be different. Just because your neighbour next door is doing it one way doesn't mean to say it's going to be right for you. As I say, it's really important to plan and to speak to people like myself and David to ensure that, you know, you've got off on the right foot.
David, if we're sort of thinking of somebody's got an idea, they want to, say they've got an old steading building and they want to convert it into 3 self-catering cottages, for an example. What's the very first thing they need to do? Do they need to sit down and have a meeting with somebody like yourself and with their accountant round a table? Obviously, that's a bit more challenging these days. It might be a Zoom call. What's the very first thing to do once you've had this brainwave of an idea?
It's just interesting today, because actually I was reading this morning, the headline in today's papers of the farm incomes have fallen by a third in the last year. So the pressure is really on. We've got the Brexit situation looming, you know, to come to reality in a few years' time, when we're looking at, you know, subsidies disappearing, and people really need to think of what they're going to do. And, you know, most people will be listening to this, and most farmers, you know, a lot of people have already diversified or thought about it, and they've got a good idea of what they should do. But if you haven't thought about it and you're thinking, you know, let's try and either jump on the bandwagon for this year, I mean, I would say that the first thing is to look at what you've got. Don't just commit yourself to, you know, you've got an old building. Look at what your resources are and see if there's things that are underutilized in terms of either buildings or land or people or whatever. But you also need to be careful right at the start. I mean, when you hear these statistics about farm incomes falling, you've got to make sure that your core business is absolutely perfectly run as best as it can be, because a business that's not going well won't go any better if you add something else onto it. You've got to get that bit right first. And then I would say at the moment, it's almost like a 2-tier opportunity. You know, the long term, glamping, self-catering or any sort of, on-farm holiday staycation things, you really need to plan them really carefully. You need a business plan, you need marketing, you need to know what you need to do with change of use and all your local authority situations, your insurance, how it's going to affect having all these people going around that you're not used to having. And so I think actually there's a real opportunity this year, which is something that people can latch on to quite quickly, because the one thing that has changed is that there's a 28-day rule in Scotland and all of the UK actually, where you're allowed to have temporary structures for up to 28 days without having planning in place. Now, last year and this year, that's been changed. In England, it's become the 56-day rule. And in Scotland, it's just become a very loosely based thing, where basically you can put up a temporary structure like a tent or a coffee shop or something like that and operate that. And the local authority, under the instruction of the Scottish Government, are to let it continue to try and help the situation. Now, I think there's a real opportunity this year for people who are thinking they fancy a bit of staycation, they fancy investing in the longer term, and they want to convert the building and look at all that. It's a good chance to do something on a smaller scale and find out how much you like having a whole bunch of strangers walking about your farm, potentially leaving litter, doing things you might not like. How do you fancy checking people in the Saturday afternoon every week, cleaning things out and getting them ready for the next lot coming in, handling the bookings, the complaints, the issues that come along. And I think there's a real opportunity this year for people to try and do that, because if you go for planning and you try to do the bigger, longer term operation, that invariably will take you months. You've got to do the business plan properly. You've got to do the planning. You've got to get things in place. So you're effectively not going to start that operation till sometime next year. And you don't really want to miss out on this year where there's this huge growth. The other thing we don't know is this massive increase going to continue into next year and the years to come? The number of people putting in staycation opportunities has increased hugely. And when the holiday market goes back to a more normal situation, will these people continue to holiday at home, or might you have something that is hard to fill and you've got to cut prices? So a lot of thinking to be done and lots of research to be done. And I think that one of the issues in Scotland and all the UK is you've got lots of tenanted farms, which have as big a difficulty as any in trying to diversify. But you need to get permission from your landlord to diversify into anything, and you can't just start putting up some tents and invite 20 lots of people along to come and stay. So you have to think about that too, and that is something I would advise you get specialist advice on that, because you could get yourself into trouble pretty quickly by irritating the lease, and that is something that can be avoided by talking with your landlord or your landlord's agent or people like ourselves in advance.
Thank you, David. Yeah, that was very interesting. And it sounds like you've got a couple of dogs barking in the background. You may be like me and you've got deliveries coming every 5 minutes, and then the dogs start going and you can't keep them quiet. But I like to have a bit of genuine noise in the background of our podcast, so I'm glad to hear them.
That is Buzz and Lulu, who are very, very small dachshunds, but have got this huge bark on them, which they bark at everything and everybody. They're
guard dogs. Very scary guard dogs.
Scary, yep.
Yeah. Look, we've heard anecdotally that people listen to these podcasts because they want to learn something. And you've taught me something already, because I did not know about the 28-day rule in terms of the relaxation. So, as you said, that is particularly relevant this summer, because whilst we do like to be positive, we have to be a bit realistic here. And I suppose everybody has to think, don't they, that setting up any kind of on-farm tourism requires hard work. And as you alluded to, it requires working on a Saturday. It requires managing staff, potentially. It requires cleaning loos. We've got to be realistic that it's difficult. And so to have the opportunity to give it a try this year sounds like a really valuable opportunity.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that farmers don't work on a Saturday, because we know plenty of them and they work,
of course,
all the hours that there are. The point is, though, in our own management business, we look after many caravan and camping sites and glamping sites and holiday accommodation. We've helped to set up many, many successful camping and on-farm catering and all sorts of different things throughout the whole of Scotland. And not everyone is a success, and not everybody enjoys the process once they get there. So I think the hardest thing will be in April, where we are now, trying to source